Hey folks, it's Coon here with Fighting for Fitness. I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about how different foods will affect your blood sugars. As I mentioned in some of my other videos, when you eat foods, the reaction to eating those foods causes your body to release a hormone called insulin. And what insulin does is it breaks the sugars down to actually produce the energy that you need in order to fuel your body. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to check my blood sugar. Right now I've got a very cheap Kroger brand blood sugar testing kit. I'm going to test my blood sugar right now after having fasted for about 13 hours. So as you can see from my phone, it's almost 1 o'clock right now. Hopefully that came into focus. I am going to get a baseline of what my blood sugar is. I assume it'll be a little bit high for a fasted state because I just got done coming from the gym, and often working out will cause your blood sugar to come up just a little bit, and partially that's because your body is releasing the stored sugars that are actually stored in your liver, which is a good thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check my blood sugar and see what we come up with for a baseline. So here goes. This should hopefully do it. This tester doesn't need all that much, so I need to wait till it tells me to put the blood in there. Here we go. And we're checking for our results. And we have an initial of 85. So my starting reading, if you can get that, 85. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go eat a 3-egg omelet. It's going to have spinach, it's going to have cheese, it's going to have a little heavy whipping cream, and I'm going to check my blood sugar again 30 minutes after eating, and then 1 hour after eating, and then an hour and a half after eating. And so this will give me a good indication. I was thinking about breaking it up between fats and proteins, but I thought I'm just going to combine the fats and the proteins together. We'll look at how much fat there is, how much protein, and if that fat and that protein doesn't increase my blood sugar, then I'm going to consider that the standard. We're going to compare the blood sugar readings from eating fats and proteins to the blood sugar reading of eating carbohydrates. So I'll get a new baseline and see what carbohydrates do. From my perspective, a normal blood sugar, normal fasted blood sugar is typically 80 to 100 is a standard fasted blood sugar. And so one of my goals, if I want to lose weight and not stimulate a high insulin response, is I want to keep my blood sugar from going over 100. That's kind of my goal. I don't do ketone strips or anything like that, but I do check my blood sugar occasionally just to see what the different foods that I'm eating do to my blood sugar. So we're going to get back with you here in 30 minutes after I eat my 3-egg omelet. Okay folks, it's been about 30 minutes since I finished my omelet. It took me about 30 minutes to get everything all put together and cooked. So now it's 2 o'clock and I'm going to check my blood sugar one more time and see where it comes in. Okay, straight at 100. I don't know if you can see that. So I'll break down what the ingredients were and how many carbohydrates, how many fats, how many calories, and how much protein here in just a little bit. We're going to check it again in 30 minutes to see if it continues to go up or to see if it goes down. Okay, so it's been 1 hour post-meal. Alright, so we're going to check the blood sugar one more time. Okay, so you got to wait on this and it'll actually tell me when it's ready to pick up the blood. Okay, and it's got enough. We're waiting. This is at 1 hour 98. Okay. Well, looks like I just barely made my benchmark of not going over 100. So my blood sugar stayed normal the whole time. We're going to check it again in 30 more minutes and see where it's at. Okay, so here we go. We're going to take the last blood sugar check. We are roughly an hour and a half past mealtime, and we're going to see what the blood sugar looks like. All right, so blood sugar is all the way back down to 81, which makes sense. We'll talk about that here in a second. So the reason that it dropped to 81 is initially I had worked out a little while ago, as I mentioned. So when we give a product called glucagon in the field, it actually releases some of the blood sugar that's stored up in the liver. And so that was what was probably maintaining my blood sugar, keeping it up to a nice normal level, which it should do. And then so I ate, and that, although it didn't produce a big spike of insulin because my blood sugar only went up to about 100, it peaked it right at 100. Well, when my blood sugar comes up, my body reads that. The pancreas then releases the insulin in order to process that sugar so I can use it on a cellular level. So when that insulin gets dumped into my system, it starts to clear the blood sugar, and in this case I got actually lower. So now what my body will do is it'll recognize, okay, blood sugar is back down to where it needs to be. Don't continue to produce insulin. That is a good thing for me. So now my body can metabolize those fats and those proteins over time. And as I mentioned before, when insulin is high, that's a gateway to store fat into your body. So you think of it just as a lift gate. When insulin goes up, then your body is able to store energy in the form of calories. It doesn't necessarily matter what form of calories those come in, although it's the carbohydrates that raise that insulin response up. So think of that as opening the gate to allow fat to be stored inside your body as just regular old fat around the middle or wherever you put it. When insulin levels are down or low, then your body has the ability to pull the fat away. So that closes the gate. So now, or switches the gate to a different direction. So now we can start pulling the fat from our bodies and using those for energy. And I'll show you the numbers, but it was around 600 calories is what I had in that omelet. And I'll put up a little slide there to show exactly what the breakdown of those calories were. So the majority of the calories came from fat. I did have some carbohydrates that were in there. And if you notice all of my ingredients, they were basically cheap ingredients. So right now we have a family of 8. So as a result of having a family of 8, we're buying cheaper, slightly less quality ingredients. But if I were to buy a little bit better ingredients, the sour cream is what I'm thinking of specifically. So that was a really cheap sour cream, and as a result, there's fructose and glucose and a whole bunch of other things in there. But if you get a natural sour cream, that would have dropped my carbohydrates by 2 grams. The other thing is I didn't need to put that much taco sauce on, but I love it. That's where some of those carbohydrates came from as well. So anyway, what I'm going to do in a future video is I'm going to compare this to a regular just bowl of cereal that I used to eat on a regular basis. Now coming back to this whole thing with the blood sugar. Once my blood sugar drops, then I have a tendency to feel like I'm hungry again. So now I'm back to my baseline, but if I spike my blood sugar up, which we normally do with eating carbohydrates, and then I get an insulin response, and it clears that blood sugar, and the blood sugar drops back down, triggers to my brain, hey, we're hungry, we need more fuel again, because it's the regulation of blood sugar. It doesn't matter how much food there is necessarily in my stomach, it's what are my blood sugar levels doing. So when my blood sugar levels start to get low, or they even start to drop fairly quickly, it triggers my brain to say, hey, we need to get more food. So when I get more food, especially if I'm on a cycle of eating carbohydrates, I'll eat those carbohydrates. It perks back up again, it peaks back up again. And then every time, remember when that insulin is high, I can store fat back onto my body. So then I drop my insulin level really, really low, because all that insulin is clearing that sugar really fast. So it clears the sugar, drops it down, I get hungry again. That's one of the problems with the way that we were taught to eat when they pulled fat out of everything and taught us to eat a high carbohydrate, low fat diet. Well, if you look at Americans, and for whatever reason Australians, I see a lot that they have the same problem that we do, and I assume other countries, is we've been cleaning fat out of our diet as we were taught to do really since about the 70s. As a result, we eat these foods that don't last in our system very long and get us a cycle. And if you think about it, with every meal, if I eat some carbohydrates and I just get a tiny bit fatter, but I never give my body a chance in order to pull that fat back out, and then I eat again and I get a tiny bit fatter, and you do that over days and weeks and months, eventually we wind up with the obesity epidemic that we have, not to mention type 2 diabetes. Now, I haven't talked very much about type 2 diabetes, but what I just described is exactly how a person develops insulin-dependent type 2 diabetes, and that's the majority that's out there. Here's the good news. If you have insulin-dependent type 2 diabetes, you earned that over time. You can also cure that over time by eating a breakfast, for example, exactly like I did. And you would have a meal that looks a lot like that as well. Very low carbohydrates, high fat, medium protein. Now when I say high fat, medium protein, when we look at the breakdown, you'll see that in total grams, the protein grams and the fat grams are pretty close. And I didn't get into the details of where all those calories come from, but as far as caloric density, we have a much greater caloric density in fat than we do in proteins. So if you want to regulate your blood sugar, you either want to avoid getting diabetes or you want to reverse type 2 diabetes, eating a higher fat, lower carbohydrate, medium protein, or even high protein, that works fine as well. Different people's bodies are going to respond to different foods. So one of the things that I would say is experiment. If you're the type of person that processes a lot of vegetables really, really well, then eat a lot of vegetables. Those work great too. You can eat a lot of vegetables in order to meet your caloric intake. Again, what I look at is around 2,000 to 3,000 calories per day for me when I'm in a leaning out to maintaining mode. I spent, over the last 24 hours, I spent about 5 or 6 hours at the gym. I did 2 workouts yesterday, and we already did a very, very long, mild intensity workout today. But in another video, we're going to talk about why I think it's essential to get some form of exercise into your fitness routine for your cardiovascular health. It also makes it so much easier to stick to a diet when you're exercising. It gives you a little bit more freedom in the foods that you can eat. Now remember, it's not a lot. You can't exercise a lot and eat a lot, but if you exercise a lot, you can eat a little bit more and have a little more flexibility. That's one of the things that I want to talk about in future videos, is how do we make a meal plan, an eating plan, a lifestyle built around food and nutrition that works for us, that's sustainable for the rest of our lives. You just got to get started, take it a little bit at a time. You're not too old, it's not too late, get after it. Woo! I gotta get in shape.